it's a very strange hack because normally in advertising, you want to target interests like that are relevant to the product.
Hmm.
Okay, but what I'm saying is like sometimes you can target completely irrelevant interests as a way to do segmentation.
And I want to talk a bit about one of the unicorn hacks that I find really interesting, but I haven't got to it yet. It's like you talk about marketing to unrelated interests, and you talk about marketing to Game of Thrones people who are interested in Game of Thrones, and something, finding your audience and finding what they're interested in that is sort of unrelated.
Okay, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. Basically, the key to finding a unicorn is basically having a high engagement rate. Like you need
Yeah.
to have people to click on your stuff because remember, if you have a high click through rate, then Google will love it, Facebook will love it, Gmail will love it, YouTube will love it. Everybody, all these algorithms will love it, but only if you have a high click through rate. And so the question that I get a lot is like, well, I'm selling like toasters or something really, really boring, like I don't know, like you know, paper supplies or something. Like it's really hard to get people to get so excited about this product because it's so boring, and so I have really low click through rates. Okay, so that's a lot of companies have are selling garbage, and it's not interesting. So how can you hack your way to make it so that your I don't know your toaster is really interesting, okay?
Yeah.
And so um, one idea, so like what the mistake that people make is it's in their targeting. So maybe they target people who like to cook, okay, because maybe they'll need a toaster, okay. That's like that makes sense, but kind of an interesting hack that I have found is that you should also target, you know, totally unrelated interests.
Mhm.
Okay, so you like you could target people who. So the example that I was giving in that presentation was like people who like Game of Thrones
Mhm.
and also like to cook. Okay,
Yeah.
now what? How are those related? Like they aren't related. Like
Mhm.
is someone who likes Game of Thrones going to buy your product? No, it doesn't make any sense. But what you could do is you could overlap those two interests and say like I only want to like people who are really like they love to cook and they love Game of Thrones, and then maybe creatively you could come up with some kind of an ad that spoke to them using
Mm.
Game of Thrones like language about how great your toaster is. Okay, so now it's not just one interest that is kind of pulling their attention. It's you're speaking to two different interests, and that might make them more appreciate the content of your ad. So a lot of these. So that's kind of a unicorn hack for doubling your or tripling your click through rate.
Mhm.
It's to come up with unusual targeting patterns to really um, really get people like
Yeah.
get people's attention. Okay, can I give you one other example?
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
okay, so a friend of mine lives in London, and she moved to London from America recently. Okay, and she was targeted with a T-shirt, like an ad, okay, on Facebook, and for to buy T-shirts. And you know what the T-shirt said? It said something like this. It said, "I I live in London. I'm a Londoner, but I'm always a an Arizona girl at heart." Okay, so Arizona is a state in America.
Yeah. Yeah.
It says, "I'm a I live in London, but I'm an Arizona girl at heart." Like, what the heck? Like, how the heck would they come up with like a T-shirt that could say that? And she recently moved from Arizona like to London. Okay, so it got her attention so much because it was talking about like that she recently moved, that she lives in London, and that she was originally from Arizona. Okay, like three different things that are kind of pulling you in that direction. And so if you're wondering like how do they target? Well, there's a demographic in Facebook ads called recently moved. Okay, so that's one of you pick that one. There's another one it's a location. Like you can target by location, so like people who live in London, so you can overlay those two. Recently moved and lived in London, but how do you get like where that they moved from Arizona, America? Like how do you figure that out? Well, I looked through her profile and she has all sorts of signals, like her high school was located in Arizona, okay, and her high school is one of the interests that you can target off of, like in Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah, so like high school, university, sporting teams. Like she likes like the Arizona football team. You know what I mean. Like so like what the advertiser was doing was they were targeting people who live in London, recently moved, and who like a certain university in Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So using those three things, the combination of all three things, they're able to produce a T-shirt ad that speaks to those unusual, unrelated factors, which dramatically increases the click-through rates. Do you understand what I'm talking about here?
Yes.
Any
Yes.
questions?
While preparing for this interview, I actually gave a lot of thought about this hack, and I figured out how to actually do it in Facebook ads. I think you already know this, but if I have a lot of fans for my toaster brand, what I can do is I can target everyone who is fans of my toaster brand, if there is, and I can narrow that audience to people who also like GOT, narrow it. And when you create that content, it will identify with people who, so the narrowing part is where it clicked with me. Oh, it's not putting it part of the same audience, but narrowing it down to people who.
Exactly. So the whole hack is to, it's a very strange hack because normally in advertising, you want to target interests like that are relevant to the product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what I'm saying is like, sometimes you can target completely irrelevant interests as a way to do segmentation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that your ads can speak to them. Like that segmentation of like people who also went to a university in Arizona. Like that's not an interesting segment for target selling T-shirts in London, right?
Yeah.
But it could be a very interesting way to segment, all the people who recently moved to London. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, unusual. I call it an inverted unicorn because like the normal way of targeting ads is to target like relevant interests, but I've found that adding in uncorrelated, unrelated interests, and then changing the copy to speak to the fact that something about their identity, like something about their interests, that can also make a very, very boring product be very, very exciting. Now, if you're selling like drones or like really exciting products like vacations to beautiful places, well then you don't need to do this. But if you're selling boring stuff that nobody wants to click on, this is a way to make it at least more interesting, so that you can get out of jail, like the algorithm jail, because anything that has very, very low click-through rates, it's invisible.